In June 2022, Israel conducted one of its largest military exercises in decades. Now, this exercise was called Chariots of Fire. It involved hundreds of aircrafts, warships, and submarines. Now, these exercises were conducted over the Mediterranean Sea near Cyprus, and the drills included long-range flight, aerial refueling, and striking distant targets. Cyprus was used as a stand-in for Lebanon, as the Israeli warplanes simulated attacking Hezbollah, its arch-enemy. Now we are seeing that phase of Chariots of Fire play out in Lebanon even as we speak. But the exercises in 2022 had another component, where waves of Israeli jets simulated an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, the drill included what we just mentioned: long-range flight, aerial refueling, and striking distant targets, which Israeli jets would have to undertake to strike at targets in Iran located over 1,000 kilometers away. Now, the jets were refueled twice during this simulation. They circled Cyprus, they conducted mock airstrikes, and this drill would simulate a wide-scale strike against Iran, including what is believed its nuclear facilities. Now, Israel has been here before. In 1981, it launched an airstrike against Iraq's nuclear reactor, Osirak. In 2006, it's believed to have sabotaged Iran's nuclear program with the Stuxnet virus. And in 2007, it destroyed a Syrian nuclear reactor. For Israel, an Islamic State with a nuclear weapon would be a threat to its existence. It has no option but to strike first. And today, as the clamor grows within Israel for a strike against Iran, the target is being talked about is Iran's crown jewels, Iran's nuclear weapons programs. And the question we're asking today are, can Israel carry out a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities without the help of the United States? What kind of munitions would they need to carry out such a strike against Iran's nuclear facilities? Would such a strike be limited, or would it be a full-scale strike package against all Iranian nuclear facilities? And then what would be Iran's response to such an Israeli strike? And finally, will such an attack on Iran's nuclear weapons facilities, its reactors, its enrichment program, will it trigger off a wider conflict in the region? Joining me to discuss this today are Itai Melchior, former executive of Israel's National Security Council, and Air Marshal Diptendra Chaudhary. Gentlemen, welcome to the News9 Plus show. Air Marshal Chaudhary, a happy Air Force Day to you, 92 years and counting.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. It's absolutely a pleasure to be with you on this day.
Right. And Itai, I must say that, while we are celebrating Air Force Day here, we're looking to the west, where the Israeli Air Force is undertaking some unprecedented combat missions. We saw what they did with Hezbollah. We're still unpacking the targeting, the air-to-ground targeting, the level of, striking deep underground targets and eliminating leadership. All of this, these are scenarios that the Indian Air Force would certainly be looking at very closely, because this is what they would be expected to do in wartime. But the big question everyone's asking is, will Israel now use Iran's unprovoked attack on it using ballistic missiles as a chance to strike at Iran's nuclear weapons program? How likely is this?
Certainly, red lines have a history of being stepped over and not always enforced.
Right.
That said, yes, this is an existential issue. By the way, not only for Israel.
Yes.
Israel is not the only a bad country in Iran's eyes.
Right.
Many Western countries are in danger. Moderate Sunni countries are in danger, and also your viewers. A good friend today of Iran is Pakistan.
Yes.
And if Iran has nuclear weapons, the day until Pakistan also has it is very short. So it's a world problem. Sadly, the world is complacent and
Yes.
has always been happy to shy away from red lines, as we just said, and have someone else deal with the problem. And,
Right.
and then the big police of the world, the US,
Yes.
has shown some lack of interest in dealing with the issue until we've gotten to where it is today. you failed to mention that throughout all the
Right.
years that you mentioned, all the big operations,
Yes.
smaller operations have allegedly taken place against scientists, against sites,
Right.
and so a lot has happened. But yes, the goal should be, and this should be the UN goal and the world goal
Yes.
should be
Yes.
to eliminate and stop this Roj nuclear program in Iran.
Right. Absolutely. Very, succinctly put, Itai, the fact that Israel is willing to go where the rest of the world isn't, which is to denuclearize its enemies, stop them short of acquiring nuclear weapons, which would be a threat to its existence. M. Ashal Chaudhary, do you see Israel doing this without US assistance? It's done so in the past, in 1981, when it struck at Osirak in Iraq. It's done so in 2006 and 7. But those were operations where the United States is believed to have been on the same page as Israel. But today, when you're looking at 2024, where the US is publicly telling Israel, do not strike at the energy facilities, do not strike at the nuclear reactors, take your win, do a proportionate strike. Do you see Israel as stepping back, listening to the US, or going and taking this one opportunity they have to completely denuclearize Iran?
Absolutely right. Israel has a history of having done this before, and it is most certainly something which is expected, because if you remember, one considers the fact that the Israeli Air Force has been always in the forefront of its military strategy.
Yes.
And in this case, this is something which it has been for a long time gaming and training for, possibly for,
Right.
like you mentioned yourself. And only thing is, it's not just one target to be hit. There are a fair number of facilities in Iran, just scattered
Yes.
mostly in the central Iran and a little bit on the coast. I think there are about 5 or 7 odd nuclear facilities and 2 reactors.
Right.
But so if it were to strike all of them, it would need an enormously coordinated operation with a huge number
Right.
of assets,
Yes.
and which will need enormous planning. And most importantly, given the long distances, it will need a lot of strategic routing,
Right.
a lot of masking of intent, of sort of as a cover, covert and divergent operations, sort of deceive and decoy.
Right.
And a huge amount of don't forget that Iran has a reasonable air defense capability. While its Air
Yes.
Force is probably not something which the Israeli Air Force takes possibly too seriously, but it
Yes.
certainly has a potent air defense capability. But Israel is a nation which has shown again and again that it has the capability to, and it most certainly has the will
Yes.
to carry out this attack. Whether it will take the US's active involvement right now, given tenuous situation of the US presidential elections,
Yes.
the timing possibly is something which Israel has most certainly taken into consideration. But given the push to shove, Israel is a nation which probably can and will go it alone if it feels pushed to do so. And don't
Right.
forget, there's enormous pressure on them. In fact, Naftali Bennett, the erstwhile PM, came out saying that Israel must act now, and it considers Iran an existential threat.
Right.
So this is something which Israel can and possibly could go ahead and do it on its own.
Right. Right. Itai, do you think Israel will go ahead and do it on its own, not wait for a green signal from Washington, given the fact that it has an opportunity now that it's presented itself after several years?
So you have to differentiate between to cripple Iran's nuclear program or to eliminate it.
Right.
I don't believe Israel on its own has the capability of totally destroying. Israel needs very heavy bombs, which the US is not supplying. It also needs to have bomber jets which can do this. Israel has shown it can get to the air defense systems, it can get physically to the places,
Yes.
and therefore it can create a lot of damage. The question is, there are 2 questions. One, does Israel want just to wreak havoc and damage in
Yes.
Iran's nuclear program, or take it out? For that, they need the US assistance.
Yes.
I don't see that happening right now. And on the contrary, and this is the second question, right now the US's main goal is to try and stop Israel. The US would very much like Israel to limit its attack to something more symbolic. Yes, maybe strike one side, not completely destroy it. They don't want Israel to strike oil facilities. They don't want oil
Yes.
prices going up or war happening before
Right.
elections, which are less than a month away. And on the other hand, they don't want Israel. They know Israel cannot, without them, carry out a full strike. So there's a kind of bargaining going on behind the scenes as we speak,
Right.
with the U.S. trying all kinds of goodies and promises to Israel
Yes.
to refrain from something very large scale.
Right, right, absolutely. Itai, I listen to you very closely, Itai, because you're almost like a soothsayer. Whatever you say on our show, it comes true in a matter of days, if not weeks. And I still remember that conversation we had a few months back where you said it was not a question of if, but when Israel would move into Lebanon, as they have indeed in the last couple of days, and that air campaign is ongoing. But Air Marshal Chaudhry, Israeli jets are attacking targets in Lebanon as we speak. They are going after Hezbollah. Do you see them having the kind of strike potential to pull out fighter jets from their ongoing missions in southern Lebanon and diverting them to attack Iran? They are a very potent air force. They're probably one of the top 5 air forces in the world. Do they have the kind of capacity to act on two fronts?
The Israeli Air Force possibly at this moment is under a fair amount of, should I say, pressure, commitment, and continuing its air operations. Played a huge role over Gaza, and now it's sort of entrenched in its operations in Lebanon. But what is most certainly that is a fact that while the Lebanon operations are in continuum,
yes,
the attack on the on any kind of specialist facility, and like as I brought out, while it may not have, it certainly probably won't have the ability to attack all the facilities.
yes,
But it most certainly could hit on certain key facilities as a show of signal, as a show of political signaling and
right,
of intent. And such an operation, to my mind, it's something. While it will involve a fair amount of air power and all kind of supportive assets. But it is something which, if it needs to do, it can most certainly do it, and it will not impinge
right,
on most of its operations. It will most certainly would have identified assets and weapon systems and its support equipment
right,
for a separate standalone mission, which will not necessarily connected to the entire operations ongoing. It might take a little sort of a tactical break to carry out this operation and come back to it.
right.
So the options are possibly huge, but as very
Right.
rightly brought out by Itai, the question is
Yes,
the fears of the likely escalation of a serious strike, which is definitive, which is widespread. It's something which I don't think anyone in the world is really keen on at this point in time.
right, absolutely. And Itai, that was going to be my next question, is that if you even carry out a limited strike against Iran's nuclear facilities or some very critical, facilities critical to their nuclear weapons program, will Iran be again forced to escalate and climb up the escalation ladder, do something as they did a few days back, or have they completely exhausted their options? I mean, Iran doesn't seem to have anything else in its arsenal other than ballistic missiles. They don't seem to hit very many targets, though.
Iran shouldn't be taken lightly, and I don't think they've exhausted their options. Remember that
Right.
they operate until now mainly through proxies.
Yes.
They can have the proxies step up. Yes, Hezbollah and Hamas have taken severe blows and are finding it hard to hit Israel as they would have loved to, but they still have the Houthis doing 100% what they are told. You have Iranian militias in Iraq and allegedly also in Syria. They have a power, and they have a much larger arsenal of missiles. And by the way,
Yes.
everybody was talking about Iran's nuclear program, but their missile program is not less worrying, and
Yes.
the ranges that they were building missiles for went far and beyond Israel. So this is again worrying for the world.
Yes.
I would like to take your views into two more points that we haven't discussed. One, we are celebrating Air Force Day, but also kudos to intelligence, because
Yes.
while Israeli intelligence maybe was on the losing side on October 7th,
Yes.
we see the precision that the Air Force is striking in southern Lebanon, that intelligence there is very, very deep, and Air Force cannot operate this well without having very good intelligence. So
Absolutely,
that is one
yes.
point. Second point, your viewers are looking at the map of India, but if they take a map of southern Lebanon or even of Israel
Yes.
and impose it, you see how tiny this is. And one of the big achievements of the Israeli Air Force is operating in such a tiny airspace with
Yes.
so many jets at the same time and with such precision. I think this is maybe if you want to study more military tactics, this is probably the biggest lesson for air forces around the world, to see how these operations have been orchestrated. On one side, the precision in small areas, or in the attack that took out Nasrallah with
Yes.
multiple jets hitting the same place with different kinds of munition, and the long range attacks in Yemen and the likes, which have proven a very long range, far away from home, without using carriers or bases.
Yes.
That is also a big achievement.
Right, absolutely. But after Entebbe, I don't think anyone's surprised where the Israeli Air Force can show up next. I think that is the gold standard in long range.
Most of your viewers were not born then at that time, and maybe not even sure how Israel actually flew thousands of miles with a decoy to release hostages that were taken to Entebbe in Uganda.
Yes.
Where Prime Minister's brother actually lost his life
Absolutely.
in that operation.
Colonel Jonathan.
Of
Yes.
hostages.
Absolutely. That's a gold standard operation. And I think it's possibly one of the first operations of the 20th century, Air Marshal Chaudhry, where the one special force raid actually destroyed Uganda's air force on the ground. 1/3 of the air force, or a number of MiGs were shot up over there. But while we study the Entebbe operation as a gold standard in long-range precision flying in almost half a century ago, what are the lessons, Air Marshal Chaudhry, that the IAF can draw from the IAF? The Indian Air Force can draw from the Israeli Air Force, as Itai was just mentioning, the kind of challenging terrain that they're operating in, not only over the sea, but long-range precision bombing, short-range precision bombing, hitting targets in urban built-up areas, deep penetration attacks where JDAMs are used 30 meters below the ground. A lot for us to learn from the Israeli Air Force.
Interestingly, both IAF and the IAF, the Israeli and the Indian Air Forces, have been, I think both are extremely professional Air Force. The Israeli Air Force has always been an Air Force which, in my younger days, we always looked up. But there is one factor which I would like to bring out. I mean, most certainly there are a lot of tactical lessons which would emerge from these kind of operations. And we also have carried out a similar kind of an operation, which we actually penetrated an adversarial air defense system and went out and carried out a strike before even the adversary could react. And this was over Balako.
Yes.
But there's two critical differences I would like to bring out between the two air forces. One is the issue of scale.
Yes.
I mean, the kind of airspace and the adversaries which we face are, in terms of size and the sheer spread of geography, is huge compared to Israel. And there's one huge stark difference, is that the Indian Air Force has potent adversarial air forces across.
Yes.
Whereas Israel has been blessed with the fact that most of its operations in the recent time have been against countries which really don't have potent air forces.
Right.
And while it has certainly shown its prowess in the Arab-Israeli war, I mean, it decimated the Arab air forces and the huge number of aircraft is shot down. But there are a whole lot of lessons in modern-day warfare where one carries out clinical surgical attacks, with minimal of collateral to hit your target systems. And that needs a whole lot of technological supporting systems. And like I probably got out, that it needs external help. I mean, Israel would need a whole lot of ISR and intelligence and accurate target data. But given the fact that the kind of threat Israel has always been facing, it is not something which is suddenly woken up to this issue.
Yes.
Israel has always kept a very close eye, and its intelligence has been always focused on the possible target systems and threats of the future. So it most certainly would have built up enough database and accurate target information well before that.
Absolutely.
But notwithstanding that, any kind of air power employment today has a huge number of contemporary lessons which will most certainly be applicable to Indian Air Force as well.
Absolutely. A lot of contemporary lessons that the IAF could learn from the Israeli Air Force, which is in operations, in the peak of operations while we are speaking. But that big operation is a few days away, we think. That is whether Israel attacks Iran and what targets it will choose. That's a story that we'll be tracking very closely. Thank you very much, Itai Melchior and Air Marshal Chaudhry, for joining us, discussing this possibility of Israel striking back at Iran and what targets they choose.